Picture the very end of New York. Not the city. Forget the towers. Forget the noise. Drive east, past the vineyards, past the windmills, past the last of the Hamptons mansions, until even the money runs out of road. Keep going until the land narrows to a thin spine of dune grass and salt air, until there is nothing ahead of you but the gray weight of the Atlantic. That is Montauk. And on a warm July morning in 2008, on a stretch of sand called Ditch Plains, three friends were walking that shoreline when they found something the ocean had left behind. Something pale. Something bloated. Something with claws and a snout that ended in what looked impossibly like a beak. One of them raised a phone and took a single photograph, and that photograph was about to outrun every one of them, outrun the beach, outrun the truth itself, and become one of the most viewed images on the early internet. They did not know it yet, but they had just photographed a monster. You have probably seen it. Even if you do not remember where, even if you cannot place the year, somewhere in the back of your mind there is a flat gray carcass lying on wet sand, hairless and swollen, its limbs splayed wrong, its face reduced to that hard protruding beak. It is one of those images you look at for exactly 1 second before your stomach tightens. Before your brain can assemble a sentence about what you are seeing, some older part of you has already filed it under a single word. Wrong. This is not supposed to be here. This is not supposed to exist. And that reaction, that fast, wordless flinch, is the entire reason the world is about to lose its mind over a dead animal on a beach in the Hamptons. So let's go back to that morning. The summer of 2008, Montauk in July is a postcard with a temper. The light comes in low and silver off the water. The surf at Ditch Plains is famous. It is one of the best breaks on the East Coast, and the lineup is already dotted with surfers waiting on the swell. The air smells like salt and seaweed and sunscreen. It is, by every measure, an ordinary, beautiful day at one of the prettiest edges of the country. And then there's the thing on the sand. The friends who found it weren't monster hunters. They weren't filmmakers. They weren't trying to fool anyone. One of them, a young local woman named Jenna Hewitt, would later say plainly that they'd just gone to grab a bite and walk the beach. And there it was. A carcass roughly the size of a small dog, lying on its back where the high tide had abandoned it. They stopped. They looked. The way you would look at a car accident, the way your eyes go to it before you decide whether you want them there. And then, because it was 2008 and because a camera now lived in everybody's pocket, one of them took the picture. That was it. No press conference, no claim of a discovery, just three people who saw something strange and did the most natural thing in the world. They showed it to other people. What that photograph captured is worth slowing down on, because the details are what did the damage. Imagine a body stripped almost entirely of fur, so the skin reads as bare and gray, the texture of wet leather left out in the sun. It is bloated, distended in that way that makes the proportions feel off, like the animal was inflated by an unkind hand. The feet are splayed and clawed, the claws long and pale and curving. The front limbs sit at an angle that, in a certain light, looks almost like hands reaching forward. And then the face. The face is the part that breaks you. The snout is elongated, hardened, the soft tissue gone, leaving something that juts out from the skull like a beak. Part bird, part dog. Part something the human eye has no folder for. The whole creature looks assembled, like pieces of three different animals stitched together by something that did not quite understand what an animal is supposed to be. You look at it, and your mind starts grabbing for names. A turtle that lost its shell? No. A drowned pig? Maybe. A dog? But the beak. Always the beak. Every easy answer your brain reaches for, that one feature, swats away. And that is the precise mechanism by which an ordinary carcass becomes a legend. Not because it had no explanation, because it had too many half-explanations. Each one true, for a moment, and then wrong. A pile of contradictions, every guess explaining one feature and tripping over another. You can dismiss one bad guess easily. It is the pile of bad guesses that makes a person stop guessing and start believing. The photograph went home with them, and then it went somewhere else entirely. Within days, that single image was everywhere, passed from blog to blog, posted to the forums and message boards that were the connective tissue of the internet back then, attached to one short, perfect, irresistible name: the Montauk Monster. Nobody can fully say who christened it. It did not matter. The name was a magnet, and the image was iron filings, and the two of them clicked together and started pulling in the entire English-speaking web. You have to understand the timing here. This was the exact moment the internet was learning a new trick, learning how a single picture could leap from one stranger to a million strangers in a matter of hours. No newspaper required, no editor, no gatekeeper. The Montauk Monster was not just an early viral image. It was one of the experiments that taught the internet what viral even meant. You did not go looking for this picture in the summer of 2008. It came looking for you. It landed in your inbox from a cousin, popped up on a forum you were reading for some unrelated reason, got texted to you with 3 question marks and no explanation. It found you. And it found everyone you knew. And here's what made it spread the way it did. The image arrived without context, and a picture without context is a story waiting to be written by whoever sees it. There was no caption explaining decomposition. There was no scientist standing beside it with a clipboard and a calm voice. There was only the thing on the sand, that pale, degloved body, that beak, and the gap where an explanation should have been. And the human mind cannot tolerate that gap. It will fill it. It will always fill it. So 100,000 people looked at the same photograph, and each one quietly wrote a private caption underneath it. And almost none of those captions said raccoon. They said mutant. They said experiment. They said monster. The story arrived before the analysis, and the story is the thing that stuck. Now layer in the stage, because the stage matters enormously. Montauk is not a generic beach. Montauk is the end of the line. It sits at the easternmost tip of Long Island, the very last hamlet before New York State runs out of land and surrenders to open ocean on 3 sides. Drive east on the Montauk Highway, and eventually the road simply stops, the asphalt giving way to dune grass and bluff, and the gray, restless Atlantic. A few thousand year-round residents hold this place through the winters, when the summer crowds drain away, and the wind comes off the water with nothing to slow it down. It is remote in a way that feels older than its zip code. It is moody. The fog rolls in thick enough to erase the lighthouse. The surf at Ditch Plains hammers the shore in long, cold sets. If you were a screenwriter and you needed a place to wash a monster ashore, you could not invent a better one than the one that already exists. The geography does half the storytelling for you before a single word is spoken. And then there is the neighbor, because Montauk does not sit alone out there at the edge of the map. A few miles off the coast, low and green and fenced, sits Plum Island. And on Plum Island there is a federal facility, an animal disease research center, real, operational, restricted, the kind of place that studies dangerous livestock pathogens behind layers of security and is genuinely, deliberately closed to the public. You cannot take a tour. You cannot stroll the shoreline. There is a ferry that ordinary people do not board, and a perimeter that ordinary people do not cross. Now hold those 2 facts in your hands at the same time. A grotesque, unidentifiable carcass on a Montauk beach. A secretive government laboratory that studies diseases on an island, a short swim from that same beach. You do not need a single piece of evidence to connect them. The geography connects them for you. The story practically assembles itself in the space between those 2 points, and the human urge to draw a line from A to B does the rest. Something got out. Something got dumped. Something washed up on the nearest shore. You want the 2 facts to be one story. And the facility's silence, the locked gate, the unanswered question, the official who will not comment, is exactly the soil the rumor needs to take root and grow. It helps the legend that Plum Island already carried a reputation long before anything washed up at Ditch Plains. For decades, the place has attracted scrutiny, real questions about safety protocols, real arguments about what should and should not be studied so close to populated shores, and a thick layer of conspiracy theory stacked on top, including a persistent and never-proven claim tying the island to the spread of a tick-borne disease. None of those darker theories has ever been established as fact, but that almost does not matter to the engine we are describing. A place that's secretive will always attract more theory than it can possibly answer. Secrecy is a vacuum, and theory rushes in to fill it. So when the Montauk Monster surfaced, it did not land in a neutral world. It landed in a world that had already been primed for years to believe that the low green island offshore was hiding something. The carcass did not create the suspicion. It inherited it. But here is where you have to be honest about the people, because the people are the part that gives the whole thing its teeth. This did not begin with a hoaxer in a studio. It did not begin with a network looking for ratings. It began with a young local woman named Jenna Hewitt and a couple of friends walking a beach on a summer day, stumbling onto something strange and doing exactly what any of us would do, lifting a phone and taking a picture. They never claimed they had found a monster. They never stood in front of a camera and swore it came from a lab. They shared a weird dead animal, the way you'd share anything weird, and the internet did all the rest of the work. And that's the detail that makes the story so durable. You can doubt a profiteer. You can poke holes in someone with something to sell. It is much harder to doubt people who never tried to profit at all, who simply found a strange thing and passed it along. Their ordinariness is what gave the legend its credibility. They were not selling you a monster. They were just as confused as you were. So the guesses came, fast and loud and contradictory. A sea turtle that had somehow lost its shell until someone pointed out that turtles do not work that way. A drowned dog, bloated past recognition until the beak came back to ruin it. A hairless pig escaped from some farm, plausible for a heartbeat, then the proportions stopped matching. An escaped experiment from the island offshore, the most thrilling guess of all, and the one with the least to stand on. Each theory explained one feature and tripped over the next, and the failures stacked up. And that growing pile of failed explanations did something strange. It did not make people give up. It made them lean in. Because if none of the obvious answers fit, the mind reasons, then maybe the answer is not obvious at all. Maybe the answer is something we do not have a name for yet. And that single inference, that leap from I can't identify it to no one can identify it, is the trapdoor every legend like this is built on. But of all the features doing the work, one stood above the rest. The beak. That was the detail nobody could file away. A drowned dog is a sad thing, but it is a knowable thing. You have seen dogs. You know roughly what one looks like wet and swollen and a few days gone. The beak refused to cooperate. It protruded from the front of the skull, hard and pale and tapered, the way a bird's bill protrudes. And birds do not come with clawed mammalian feet and a barrel chest. That mismatch is what pushed the carcass over the line. As long as people were looking at a body, they could argue about which animal it was. The instant they looked at the beak, the argument changed shape entirely. It stopped being which animal and started being what is this? One word, one feature, and the whole conversation tilted from the ordinary into the unknown. And the feet did not help. The feet, frankly, made everything worse. The front limbs ended in long, curved claws, and the proportions read as wrong in a way that is hard to put your finger on, but easy to feel. The limbs too long for the body, or the body too short for the limbs, the joints sitting at angles that did not quite resolve. To a lot of people, the front paws looked uncomfortably like hands, not paws, hands. And that is exactly the kind of detail that crawls up the back of your neck, because hands belong to us and to the things closest to us, and seeing them on a beaked, hairless thing on a beach scrambles something deep and old in the brain. What almost nobody factored in those first viral days was what salt water does to a body over time. Water stretches things. It bloats some parts and shrinks others. It loosens skin and pulls limbs into postures the living animal never held. The geometry you were staring at was not the animal's geometry. It was the ocean's edit of it. You were not looking at a clear creature. You were looking at a riddle the water had reshaped and then reading that reshaping as design. So let's say it plainly, the way the rumor was actually being told around kitchen tables and message boards that summer. Plum Island. Animal Disease Center is real. It studies dangerous livestock pathogens, the kind of organisms you genuinely do not want loose in a country's food supply. It is fenced. It is restricted. The public does not stroll through it. All of that is true, and none of it is sinister on its own. That is just what a high-containment research facility is. But the human mind is not like two mysterious things sitting near each other without a thread between them. A mysterious carcass. A mysterious island. A few miles of water in between. And the urge, the almost physical urge, to tie those two facts into a single story. You want them to be one thing. The facility's silence makes it easy to pretend they already are. The lab does not have to confirm anything. It only has to say nothing, and the saying nothing does all the work the rumor needs. And the island had earned its share of that suspicion honestly, over decades. It had drawn real scrutiny, questions about safety protocols, about what happens to a place like that during a hurricane, about whether containment is ever truly absolute. It had collected conspiracy theories the way a magnet collects filings, including that persistent, never substantiated whisper linking it to the spread of disease. None of the darkest claims were ever proven, but a place that restricted will always generate more theory than it can ever put to rest, and the theories do not need proof to spread. They need only a vacuum and an audience, and Plum Island supplied the first while the internet supplied the second. So when people looked from the carcass to the island and back again, they were not being crazy. They were doing exactly what that geography had been training people to do for years. The island made the leap for them. They just took the step. Now hold that image in your mind because the story is about to do the worst possible thing a mystery can do, and the worst possible thing is also the most convenient. The Montauk Monster at this point has everything a legend could ask for. It has a name, and a great one. The kind of name that sounds like a movie poster. It has a place, remote and moody and photogenic. It has a sinister neighbor across the water. It has a photograph that has already escaped its makers and gone everywhere. And then, right at the moment when someone with the right training could have walked down to that beach, knelt in the wet sand, taken a sample, and ended the entire debate forever, the carcass is gone. It is not recovered. It is not bagged, tagged, refrigerated, sent to a lab. By most accounts, it was taken away by a local and simply lost, leaving behind nothing but pixels in memory. And if you want to understand why this case never closed cleanly, that vanishing is the whole answer. You cannot test a photograph. You cannot run dentition through an analysis when there are no teeth in front of you, only a low-resolution image of teeth. The body was the one thing that could have settled it by force, and the body walked off the stage before the experts ever arrived. If you want to be in the room when someone finally looks at that photograph the way the internet refused to, coldly and anatomically, feature by feature, subscribe now, because that is exactly where this goes next. Because up to this point, everyone has been reacting, gasping, naming, theorizing, sharing. Nobody has been measuring. And the moment somebody finally measures, the beak you've been staring at is about to stop being a beak. But to get there, we have to sit for a moment with what it actually means to lose your only piece of evidence and why that loss didn't kill the legend. It fed it. Because a mystery with a body is a problem to be solved. A mystery without one is a story that never has to end, and stories are far more durable than carcasses. The body could have disappointed everyone. The body could have been ordinary. The photograph, freed from the body, gets to stay exactly as strange as the day it was taken. And then the right person finally looks. Not a forum skeptic firing off a one-line reply, not a blogger chasing traffic, but a trained vertebrate zoologist and paleontologist, a man who has spent his career on exactly this kind of anatomical puzzle, the kind of specialist who can glance at a degraded skeleton and start naming bones. He does, in public, the one thing nobody else had bothered to do. He stops reacting to the image and starts reading it. And here's why that matters. You can scroll past a comment thread. You can roll your eyes at an anonymous account insisting it knows what something is. But when a working zoologist sits down with the photograph and walks through it limb by limb, ignoring him doesn't make you brave. It just costs you the answer. His conclusion is almost insultingly ordinary, and that is precisely what makes it so hard to argue with. This, he says, is a raccoon. A common North American backyard and trash can raccoon, decomposed, waterlogged, and degloved by the ocean. Look at the limb proportions once you account for the bloat. Look at the structure of those feet, the way the front paws read almost like little hands. Look, where you can, at the teeth. They don't line up with a sea turtle or a sheep or an escaped experiment. They line up with an animal you have almost certainly seen alive in your own neighborhood after dark. You wanted a new species. The anatomy keeps handing you a very old, very common one. And the beak, the single feature that turned a dead animal into an unknown, is the part that breaks the cleanest, because a raccoon does not have a beak. What a raccoon has is a snout, full of bone and cartilage, covered in fur and soft tissue. Strip that fur away. Let the soft outer flesh rot and slough off in salt water. What you are left with is exposed bone and hardened tissue jutting forward from the skull, and that exposed structure genuinely, honestly reads as beak-like. It is not a beak. It is a raccoon's face with the disguise of being alive removed. The ocean did the rest. Waterlogging swells the body until the proportions stop matching the living animal. The hair washes loose and floats away, leaving pale, leathery skin. And the sum of those ordinary processes is a creature you have seen 1,000 times, wearing a costume made entirely of rot. This is the honest engine underneath the whole phenomenon, and it is bigger than one beach in the Hamptons. Decomposition is nature's special effects department, and it works for free all over the world on a schedule. Bloat, hair loss, exposed bone, these are the tools that have turned ordinary whales, sharks, seals, and dogs into globsters and sea monsters on coastlines for as long as people have walked beaches. Your brain is simply not built to identify the recently dead. You can recognize a living raccoon in a heartbeat, show you that same animal a week after it drowned and bloated, and your gut files it under wrong before your reason gets a vote. You are not stupid for seeing a monster. You are human, and humans are genuinely terrible at this specific task. So state it cleanly, the way the evidence allows. Most experts converge on the same unglamorous verdict, a decomposed raccoon, with a drowned dog as the leading alternate reading. No lab origin required. No new species needed. The Plum Island connection has exactly zero supporting evidence beyond proximity and vibes. A mysterious island near a mysterious carcass, stitched together by the human craving for the two to be one story. You should be allowed to say that out loud. The most likely answer is mundane, and mundane is permitted to be the truth. But be fair to the holdouts, because honesty cuts both ways. The body is gone. Most likely a raccoon is a strong inference. It is not a lab-confirmed fact stamped on a specimen lying on a steel table. A few features stayed debatable, and they stayed debatable precisely because nobody could ever test the thing. This case was closed by reasoning, not by proof. You can fully accept the raccoon and still admit that gap with a straight face. That is not weakness. That is what evidence actually looks like when the evidence walked off a beach in somebody's arms and was never seen again. And here's the part that should stay with you longest. Almost nobody remembers the raccoon. Everybody remembers the monster. That gap between what it was and what it became is the real story. One phone photo taken by people who never tried to profit from it became a global cryptid in roughly 72 hours, at the exact moment the internet learned how to hurl a single image across the entire planet overnight. The story arrived before the analysis, and the story is what stuck. You decided what that thing was in the first second you saw it. The science spent years politely catching up to correction, and it mostly lost because correction never travels as fast as a great name on a creepy shape. So when the next pale, swollen, wrongly proportioned body slides onto a beach somewhere, and it will, because warming seas and shifting currents and eroding shorelines are delivering more carcasses to more coastlines every year, and there have never been more cameras waiting, you'll get to choose. You'll feel the gut pull first. Then you'll remember the snout that wasn't a beak. So tell me below. Skeptics, post the washed-up monster you genuinely think still has not been explained, the one that still nags at you. Believers, tell me exactly what testing that lost body would have needed to show to convince you it really was something new. And then decide honestly, next time the tide brings you something pale, are you going to call it a raccoon or a monster?